So welcome everybody. Thank you all for being here for this webinar on a very important topic about the Stop the Money pipeline. We'll be hearing from Ayako Nagano and a few other panelists in a few minutes. But I just want to tell you a few things first. One is that this webinar is being hosted by Transition US, which is the national hub for the International Transition Towns movement that is building local community resilience and self-reliance in over 1,000 communities in 50 countries worldwide. So we're very happy to be hosting this webinar today. If you're new to us, please go to our website, which is transitionus.org. and sign up for our e-newsletter, find out about upcoming events, and even make a donation if you're able to support this free series. We do have a number of upcoming events besides this one. Tomorrow, our National Inner Resilience Network will be offering a webinar with the Daily Acts organization out of Northern California about inner resilience and outer change. Important topic for these troubling times. There is also a continuation of our Building Bridges series on diversity, inclusion, social justice, privilege with our social justice working group. And then another webinar with our Politics and Policy in Transition working group on EcoVista, which is our the newest transition initiative in the United States. And that's going to be with University of California at Santa Barbara professor John Foran. So do check out all those events. Lots of good things going on while you're stuck at home. We aim to provide both inspiration and practical models that you can replicate in your local community. The last thing I'm going to say is that we are using the Zoom webinar platform, so it could be a little bit different from what you're used to with Zoom meetings. Here we can't see you or hear you, but you can type a question at any time into the Q&A module. If you have a question about anything. There'll be a couple different periods throughout this where Ayako and others will stop and take questions, and but you can enter them in any time, and I will ask them in the order that they're received. Please do put your questions into the Q&A module rather than the chat. That makes it a lot easier for me to track in just one place. Okay, so without further ado, I want to introduce Ayako Nagano, who serves as a managing attorney for the Midori Law Group and specializes in serving Japanese American seniors. She also serves as secretary of the board for 3 501c3 nonprofits, Common Vision, that installs school gardens across California, Transition Berkeley, a local transition town initiative to bring neighbors together to build a more equitable, sustainable, and resilient future for Berkeley, and Nippon Kobo, which produces cross-cultural programs by luminaries in the Japanese American community. So much more to say about Ayako, very important member of our National Social Justice Working Group, and I think you will very much enjoy hearing from her today. So pass it over to you, Ayako.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, Don. I want to recognize, we're going to also have 3 other Stop the Money Pipeline fellow organizers, Mary Kay from 350 Butte in Chico in California, Patrick Houston from New York, and we'll do another intro before they start speaking later on. And also Ruth from Rainforest Action Network will be joining us later. So with that being said, I want to take a moment to recognize this moment in time that we are in, depending on where you live in the United States. You're either right in the middle of the pandemic or you're bracing for it. and most of us are staying at home. And this is a real crisis. I mean, we're all kind of rolling with the punches. I have a 6-year-old child at home that we are now caring for full time, and he's so pent up that he's climbing over me all the time. So I wanted to start with a talk about health first, and maintaining health during these trying times. So I am speak on trauma issues sometimes. When I went through 9/11 and when I went through Fukushima, I experienced trauma firsthand, and so I've been able to speak about what that feels like. And so I am a co-chair of the California chapter of a group called ITRC California, or International Transformational Resilience Coalition. It's a coalition of 350 mental health trauma specialists, climate activists, faith leaders, and we teach best practices about what we should be doing during these trying times. So one of the things that we believe as ITRC and that we know is that everyone will be traumatized. So we want to teach 3 techniques about how to combat this trauma. And one is to learn to recognize trauma. The first step is to know what that feels like or might look like. So we have this little model of a brain that we have, very sophisticated model that we've created here. This is the neocortex, or the frontal cortex of our brain, and this is our amygdala. And when we are traumatized, the neocortex or frontal cortex loses our, so the function of the neocortex is to make informed decisions. And we lose that executive function when we're traumatized. And we walk around like this, exposing our amygdala, which has one of 3 responses, flight, fight, or flee. And so we're kind of, when we're triggered, we just walk around not just reacting to things and not being able to really absorb information and then make informed decisions. So in these trying times, we need our brains to function, to face our challenges. And so when we're triggered, we want to regain our functions. And how do we do that? And we call it presencing skills. And this is something that a lot of us have been working on. And this is the self-care part of mental health is, we do it by stretching, yoga, meditation, exercise, singing, dancing, any number of ways that we can calm ourselves. Please deploy those techniques when you know that you are feeling triggered, and take the time it takes to care for yourself, because without that, we don't have anything. So one of the easiest ways I've learned to calm myself is to breathe in 4 seconds and breathe out 8 seconds. And breathing out longer than it takes to breathe in triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, which calms us. The same thing with chanting or meditation or anything that we're just kind of, chanting, like we're singing, we're exhaling more. Those activities all affect our trigger our parasympathetic nervous system to calm us. So those are good techniques, and these are really good time. This is a good time to be deploying your self-care techniques. And then once we've calmed ourselves, what do? It's called purposing skill. So in this, like once we've regained our nerves and the function of our frontal cortex, we want to help ourselves and others towards connecting to a purpose that engages the source of trauma, and that is really the most healing act that we can do for ourselves and others to stay hopeful. This is what mental health practitioners and the leading trauma specialists are saying. So in doing transition work, this is how we've been showing up, which is to redirect ourselves and engage in something that is purposeful in the world. And so thank you for doing the work. And yeah, let's talk about how that might look like for some. Yeah, this is, you know, just connecting people to purpose is one way to help other people and ourselves. So this is just one way to show up, is to connect people, right, to transition activities. But I want to talk about the Stop the Money pipeline as another way to show up. So just to emphasize like the science between having a purpose and the healthfulness of it, I love this article from the New Scientist, August 24th, 2011. They had a whole entire issue focused on the science of healing. And one of the articles is called Heal Thyself, Know Your Purpose. It's my favorite article from the New Scientist of all time. It said what really matters. So the article was about, you know, why having a purpose in life is healthful. And one of the quotes says, what really matters is having a sense of purpose in life, whatever it might be. Having an idea of why you're here and what is important increases our sense of control over events, rendering them less stressful. So the article goes on and talks about a 3-month meditation study. Participants were already keen meditators, so the study gave them a chance to spend 3 months doing something important to them. Spending more time doing what you love, whether it's gardening or voluntary work, has a similar effect on our health. The big news from the study was that the profound impact of having the opportunity to live your life in a way that you find meaningful was healthful. So it also goes on to say that this these activities help repair chromosome structures, but that's the wonky science part. I'm going to send you these slides with links. So if you're more interested in that, there are links in here that you will see. And I also wanted to point out that we have physical bodies that we need to be taking care of right now. And we know that, you know, there are hormones that trigger happy hormones, and we need to be triggering them right now. And just looking at your body as like a little machine that needs certain, you know, stimuli. So exercise, massage, meditation, sleep, listening to calm music, good nutrition produces serotonin. Eggs, cheese, pineapples, tofu, salmon, nuts, seeds, turkey. Who knew? Those produce happy hormones. Of course, there's other hormones like oxytocin, which is triggered by relationship successes, or endorphins, which is also known as the runner's high. So I just want to, this is a reminder, I know you might know all this, but just a reminder that these are things that we can do to stay healthy. Just wanted to stop right there and take any questions or answers. I actually want to throw out a question as well here, is do you have a purpose statement? And if so, what is it? And are there ways that you can creatively show up, or you have been creatively showing up for the purpose of promoting that purpose?
So I don't see any questions yet, but if you would like to enter a question and have Ayako respond, you can put that into the Q&A. You can also put a comment in there if you'd like to make a comment about any of this. Otherwise, we can move on. I know Ayako has a lot to say here.
So now I wanted to talk about why bother, right? Because we might be in that hibernation state where I, you know, have had really challenging moments this past month where I just wanted to curl up and hibernate. But I wanted to throw out this call of action to stay vigilant during these times for several reasons. And the first one is an explanation of disaster capitalism. Naomi Klein several weeks ago made a great video. You might have already seen it, but if you haven't, it's really to point. So I'll update some of the information in the video right after the video, but here's the video.
Can you all hear the audio now?
It's all new.
Can you hear the video?
view options.
That are lying around. Friedman, one of history's most extreme free market economists, was wrong about a whole lot, but he was right about that. In times of crisis, seemingly impossible ideas suddenly become possible. But whose ideas? Sensible, fair ones, designed to keep as many people as possible safe, secure, and healthy? Or predatory ideas, designed to further enrich the already unimaginably wealthy while leaving the most vulnerable further exposed? The world economy is seizing up in the face of cascading shocks.
COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
In the wake of the coronavirus crisis, stocks have stopped trading on Wall Street after a 7% drop.
This is a historical day, the biggest drop we've seen since that crash in 1987.
The drop was spurred by a growing oil price war as the market was already weakened by coronavirus fears.
No, I don't take responsibility at all.
In the midst of this widespread panic, corporate lobbyists of all stripes are, of course, dusting off all the ideas they had lying around. Trump is pushing a suspension of the payroll tax, which could bankrupt Social Security, providing the excuse to cut it or privatize it completely. An idea that has been lying around for a very long time.
A worker at his or her option ought to be allowed to put some of their own money in a private savings account.
Lying around on both sides of the aisle.
When I argued that we should freeze federal spending, I meant Social Security as well. I meant Medicare and Medicaid.
And then there are the ideas being floated to bail out some of the wealthiest and most polluting sectors in our economy.
We are working very closely with the cruise line industry, likewise with the airline industry. They're two great industries, and we'll be helping them through this patch.
Bailouts for fracking companies, not to mention cruise ships, airlines, and hotels, handouts which Trump could benefit from personally. Which is a big problem because the virus isn't the only crisis we face. There's also climate disruption, and these industries that are getting rescued with our money are the ones driving it. Trump has also been meeting with the private health insurers.
We're meeting with the top executives of the health insurance companies.
The very ones who have made sure that so many Americans can't afford the care they need. And what are the chances they don't have their hands out? It seems like the whole pandemic is getting outsourced.
Well, Mr. President, thank you for inviting us here today, along with our colleagues from Walmart and Walgreens and our partners at CVA. Normally, you view us as competitors, but today we're focused on a common competitor, and that's defeating the spread of the coronavirus.
The Fed's first move was to pump $1.5 trillion into the financial markets, with more undoubtedly on the way. But if you're a worker, especially a gig worker, there's a very good chance you're out of luck. If you do need to see a doctor for care, there's a good chance no one's going to help you pay if you aren't covered. And if you want to heed the public health warnings to stay home from work, there's also a chance that you won't get paid. Of course, you still need to pay your rent and all of your debts, medical, student credit card, mortgage. The results are predictable. Too many sick people have no choice but to go to work, which means more people contracting and spreading the virus. And without comprehensive bailouts for workers, we can expect more bankruptcies and more homelessness down the road. Look, we know this script. In 2008, the last time we had a global financial meltdown, the same kinds of bad ideas for no strings attached corporate bailouts carried the day. And regular people around the world paid the price. And even that was entirely predictable. 13 years ago, I wrote a book called The Shock Doctrine, The Rise of Disaster Capitalism. It described a brutal and recurring tactic by right-wing governments. After a shocking event, a war, coup, terrorist attack, market crash, or natural disaster, they exploit the public's disorientation, suspend democracy, push through radical free market policies that enrich the 1% at the expense of the poor and middle class. But here is what my research has taught me. Shocks and crises don't always go the shock doctrine path. In fact, it's possible for crisis to catalyze a kind of evolutionary leap. Think of the 1930s, when the Great Depression led to the New Deal.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
In the United States and elsewhere, governments began to weave a social safety net so that the next time there was a crash, there would be programs like Social Security to catch people.
The right of every family to a decent home, the right to adequate medical care, and the opportunity to achieve and enjoy good health.
Look, we know what Trump's plan is. A pandemic shock doctrine featuring all the most dangerous ideas lying around, from privatizing Social Security to locking down borders to caging even more migrants. Hell, he might even try canceling elections. But the end of this story hasn't been written yet. It is an election year, and social movements and insurgent politicians are already mobilized. And like in the 1930s, we have a whole bunch of other ideas lying around.
Do we believe that everybody should be entitled as a right to health care?
Stop organizing and fighting until all unhoused folks who want shelter have shelter. Canceling student debt.
It makes so much sense that if you're sick, that you should not be penalized where you don't have an income.
Many of these ideas were dismissed as too radical just a week ago. Now they're starting to seem like the only reasonable path to get out of this crisis and prevent future ones.
Now, here's something that helps explain the difference between the testing situation in South Korea and the US. The South Korea, like European countries and Canada, has universal single-payer insurance, and that means that it's easier to mobilize, and also people know what to do. There is pretty much one answer for how to get testing. The US is a patchwork of countless different systems, and so you can't say, here's exactly the steps that every American should take in order to get tested.
And with Washington suddenly in the giant stimulus business, this is precisely the time for the stimulus that many of us have been talking about for years.
Today is the day that we truly embark on a comprehensive agenda of economic, social, and racial justice in the United States of America.
It's called the Green New Deal. Instead of rescuing the dirty industries of the last century, we should be boosting the clean ones that will lead us into safety in the coming century. If there is one thing history teaches us, it's that moments of shock are profoundly volatile. We either lose a whole lot of ground, get fleeced by elites, and pay the price for decades, or we win progressive victories that seemed impossible just a few weeks earlier. This is no time to lose our nerve. The future will be determined by whoever is willing to fight harder for the ideas they have lying around.
So I just wanted to underscore, and you know, there's so much happening right now: pushbacks, rollbacks, bailouts. So just to list some of them that are happening right now, the Environmental Protection Agency has indefinitely suspended enforcement's emission rules for automobiles have been rolled back. The Federal Reserve handed a sweetheart deal to BlackRock, an asset management company, to manage the Fed's new debt buyout program despite serious conflicts of interest. The Commodity Futures Trading Commissions granted Capital One Bank a waiver for its commodity swaps with oil and gas companies, which set a dangerous precedent, a public bailout for big banks' risky bets on oil and gas. There's no strings attached bailouts of industries proposed that are the industries that are instrumental to the climate crisis: the airline industry, the gas and oil industry, the cruise industry. The issuance of passports have been suspended unless there is an emergency. You can't get a passport. 3 states in the last month have passed laws making pipeline protests a felony. akin to terrorism, Kentucky, South Dakota, and West Virginia. Indigenous peoples are being removed from territories to give way to oil and gas private ownership. Despite the pandemic, Keystone, the pipeline, is to start construction this month in Montana, endangering the workers, they're for the benefit of TransCanada, a Canadian oil company. So all these things are happening in lightning speed, and it is disaster capitalism at play. And so we're coming in at a time, this talk is, this webinar is at a time when we're seeing all these things happen. And I, for one, I feel a little powerless. So I think it's a really good, a time to ask transitioners. We've been showing up for positive solutions and community building work. And, this is Stop the Money Pipeline, and the activities here that we'll be talking about are outside this, what we've been doing as an organization transition and as a movement. So why now? Why are we saying no to the financial, the companies that are financing climate change? And I wanted to invite Dawn, who is co-chair of Transition US, to address that a little. Is Transition endorsing this work?
Yeah, with the International Transition Towns movement and Transition US, we've been really focused on building local community resilience all over the place, in communities all over the world and all over this country. And that's going to continue to be our main focus. That is our mission. That is our main contribution, I think, to the world. But we've always seen ourselves as part of a larger movement of movements. And as one of my mentors, Joanna Macy, has long said, that there's 3 different kinds of actions. There are holding actions, which might be protest actions or things like Stop the Money Pipeline, which are halting the destruction of our planet and the destruction of communities. And that is absolutely essential, no question about it. We have building alternative structures, which is mostly the work of the transition movement, and creating the new paradigm, spreading the new paradigm, which is also critically important, new ways of thinking about and being in the world. And indeed, transition touches all these 3. I think we're rooted in the alternative structures, but we need to see it as part of one effort to bend the trajectory of our future towards more just and sustainable communities. And so that's why we're happy to be a part of this effort.
Great, thank you for that, Dawn. I also wanted to just plug in one more this is a little bit my angle of things, but as many of you know, there's a conference called Bioneers, and it's a conference in Marin about earth health and how we can show up. It's been going on for years. It's very well attended. There's a indigenous tribal leader that I really love. He's a speaker often at Bioneers, and his name is Ilarion Merkulioff. And he basically said, I've lost my big quote, but the Hopi say that women will be restored as original healers in our time. We have been in the masculine imbalance for some time. The message to the coming generations were hidden. The language, the vibrations are created from the land. The mind is where masculine imbalance is born. We are taught what we should know instead of knowing what we should know. We are all talking heads. We have accepted this imbalance, and women coming together will heal themselves and create this container of creativity, and then we'll create. And I wanted to put this quote in there because I think given the dominant paradigm and what hasn't been valued, we are showing up as healers, and we want to give strength and voice to the healers that have been undervalued in our world. And so it requires us to be unconventional and a little messy and also angry sometimes, and to show up with that. And I want to say that it's okay to show up that way right now, given the dominant paradigm. I also wanted to just say that that's not to devalue male healers, because there's a lot of great male healers.
Yeah, Echo, did you want to forward your slides? We're still seeing the one with the intercept.
Oh, gosh. I am seeing the correct one, but
okay.
I think Zoom sometimes. Thank you.
Yep.
Can you see the correct slide? It's
yeah,
below.
We have the quote now.
Okay, apologies. You will get these slides, so hopefully that didn't cause a confusion. I wanted to show, just briefly talk about, and this is my, I'm on the Transition U.S. Social Justice working group, and I wanted to make a social justice plug about the messy work that we are doing in the environmental work. And the leaders of the U.S. environmental movement know we need to involve people of color in the environmental movement, and thus far, it's been challenging for multiple reasons. And the leadership, which has mostly been white, have not been able to engage their Black, Indigenous, people of color base. So an organization called the Green Leadership Trust, and by the way, the director, Francisco Olivares Paco, is on the line, on the phone listening, and so thank you for attending, Paco, leads a conversation about racial equity in the environmental movement. At a recent gathering in Washington, D.C., some notable white leaders of prominent environmental nonprofits openly recognized our painful past of all the things that have happened in our country that keep us separated, and to do the messy work of being vulnerable and talking about these things openly, so that we can come together and really work on the issues that we need to be working on in this country together. And I'm not going to show the video. There's a link in here, and when you get the slides, if you have time, please do take a look. So we're running short on time, of course, so I'm just going to briefly touch upon, I have a legal studies degree from UC Berkeley. I also have 2 other degrees in law. So as a legal scholar and an ethicist, like the legal studies undergraduate degree was all about like the history and the theology and the ethics of law and the economics and the sociology too. But we talked a lot about ethics. And I want to say that when this country was formed, we separated religion from lawmaking. And that this conversation took place during the Age of Enlightenment, during the 1700s. So, like, why is this relevant? There's another book that we read in college. It basically was written by a German philosopher named Immanuel Kant. And Kant wrote that without a standard of morality and ethics, a legal system could not exist, at least for long. And so we live in this time when the law is dysfunctional. And I know you all know this, but I just want to underscore that there are reasons why we are here. And I also wanted to plug in this quote from the Dalai Lama that says that we can so tea is like religion and water is like ethics. And we can live without tea and religions, but we cannot live without water or ethics. So, again, to drive the points home. So how can we show up? So in my, I was in a place where I was angry and I needed a place to like do something about it. So we're going to be talking about the Stop the Money pipeline, and the slides are a little out of order, but we have 4 targets, and I feel like I should stop and ask if there's any questions right now. Are there any?
Not seeing any in the Q&A module as of yet, but
Okay,
please,
I'm just going to dive into the Stop the Money pipeline, if that's okay.
please place your questions in the Q&A module.
Okay.
And we'll take care of them in a few minutes.
Oh, there seems to be one, two.
Yep, they're popping now.
Okay.
So we have a question from Sylvia Holmes. Who started Stop the Money pipeline?
Oh, okay. So it was started by a lot of nonprofits, and I'm going to go ahead and go to that slide of. I'm going to show you a video. Where is that video? Here it is. So this will talk about the founders. It was started by a lot of the larger green nonprofits like the Sierra Club, Greenpeace, Rainforest Action Network, etc. I'll just show you the video.
What I'm doing right now is one of the most powerful things you can do to fight climate change. I'm Jane Fonda. Exxon, Chevron, BP, and Shell aren't the only companies causing the climate crisis. There's also Chase Bank. It's true. Ever since the Paris Climate Accords, Chase has funneled $196 billion into the oil, coal, and gas companies to look for more oil, coal, and gas. And that's the stuff that's laying waste to our planet. We need to keep it in the ground, not dig up more. So cut up your Chase ATM card. Cut up your Chase credit card and film yourself doing it, and then share it on social so that Jamie Dimon, the CEO of Chase, will get the message. And then move your money to a better bank. To find out how, go to stopthemoneypipeline.com. 2020 is the year we go after those financing the destruction of our planet. Thanks for listening. Now let's all stop the money pipeline.
Yeah, I love that Transition US is right there in the center.
Yes. So I wanted to. Do you see my slides now? With the organizations that have started. You do. Okay, great. So these are the organizations that initially joined the conversation. We had a meeting in November in Vermont. Bill McKibben lives in Vermont, and so he gathered some people. And he wasn't the only person that started this conversation, but these organizations came together and decided that to form a coalition to target the financial banks that are financing climate chaos together in a concerted effort. So hopefully that answers the question. I saw the other two questions, which maybe we can talk about it at the end. So I wanted to get to the point where we start brainstorming, because I think that is what we want to do. So just to kind of dig in a little bit more about who the targets are with the campaign. So the campaign itself formed to go after the financial industry that has been financing climate change or in climate destruction with our money. And so the bankers, the leading banker who is investing in fossil fuel infrastructure is JP Morgan Chase. They've invested $268 billion since 4 years, since the Paris Climate Agreement, followed by Wells Fargo, Citibank, and Bank of America. The leading insurance company is Liberty Mutual. They insure projects like the Trans Mountain Pipeline and the Keystone XL pipeline. And the asset managers, BlackRock, manages nearly $7 trillion. And they are, as a result, the biggest investor in fossil fuels. And it's really single-handedly financing fossil fuels and destruction. And institutional investors like university endowment funds and state and city pension funds are also need to divest. So these are the targets, and just to go through the banking numbers, because there are very concrete numbers that have been put together by the Rainforest Action Network, Bank Track, Indigenous Environmental Network, Oil Change International, Reclaim Finance, and the Sierra Club. And the numbers speak for themselves. I hope you can see very clearly that Chase spent $268 billion in the last 4 years, followed by Wells Fargo, Citibank, and Bank of America. These are egregious numbers. And I just want you to look at how much we're spending money, how much we're spending on these infrastructures. And I'm going to go to in the interest of time, I'm going to go to the next set, 19 through 35. And I just wanted to call attention to the yellow part of the screen, $2.749 trillion in the last 4 years invested in fossil fuel infrastructure. And when we know better not to do that. And these companies have have made a little bit of a commitment. Like they actually have made statements. Chase has made a statement that says that they recognize that they need to adjust their portfolio, but their actions aren't following, because we need to put more pressure on them to actually walk the talk. So here you can see again that JP Morgan Chase leads by 36% above all other banks, the next in line being Wells Fargo, being the biggest spender. And that's why Chase has been such a big target. And this last slide also shows that Chase is single-handedly investing, the #1 banker of fossil fuel expansion, Arctic oil and gas, offshore oil and gas, fracking, coal mining, tar sands. All these dirty technologies that we need to get rid of. So this is why we're going after the banks, the insurance companies, asset managers. I've put in links for Liberty Mutual and BlackRock here so you can get more information. They have their own numbers and reasons why we should be going after them. So I will go to the question and answer about the numbers or who the targets are. Are there any questions?
Yeah, we got a bunch of questions lined up here. 6 to be exact. So we have a question from Louise Hoff about should we move our money to credit unions?
So I wanted to start brainstorming very quickly, since we have people on the phone, about like how we could show up, and that's one of the ideas. I'm actually, if we could just go through some of the ideas that have been are being recommended. I think it'll answer some of these questions, and then can we come back to these questions, Don, just in the interest of time? Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, I'm sorry. So we saw the Jane Fonda video, and up to now we've been showing up. I'm not going to show this video, actually. It just shows how people have physically been protesting and shutting down bank branches. And we've seen Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, issue a statement. Chase issued a statement about climate change. So they've moved an inch. They recognize publicly that they need to do something, but they haven't yet, except for a few minor changes. So this is why we need to be showing up. And the last slide is the brainstorming slide, which is where I wanted to get to, and all these questions are getting to. So move your money. So we're asking, one of the ways you could show up is to move your money. To answer your question, Louis, about the credit unions, if you go visit the stopthemoneypipeline.com website, under the resources tab, there are banks listed that are better alternative banks that do not fund fossil fuel infrastructure. And credit unions are part of it. Amalgamated is listed, also a couple other banks. I am in the process of moving my money out of Bank of America, my law office money, and we just created an account with a beneficial bank, which also doesn't invest in fossil fuels. So this process takes time and concerted effort to do, but if you have the freedom to move your money away from the bad acting banks, that's and send them a message that says we're not going to do business with you because of your business practices. That sends a very strong message. Another way Jane Fonda recommended is take a video of yourself cutting your Chase credit cards and put it on social media. There's 3 days of action coming up, April 22nd, 23rd, 24th of this month. It'll be 3 days of online streaming content led by the Future Coalition and the Stop the Money Pipeline and a couple other organizations that are coming up with creative ways of showing up. Today, actually, at 11 a.m., like at the same time as the webinar, there's also like another Zoom call about how we can show up during this pandemic. And a lot of the solutions, a lot of the asks will be showcased during those 3 days, how we want you to show up. I wanted to invite Ruth, Patrick, and Mary to join the call to start to talk about how we can show up. Are you there?
Yes.
Hi. And so Patrick and Ruth, you've been part of the Stop the Money Pipeline Coalition. And why did you join and how are you showing up?
Sure, I can jump in quickly. First, hi everybody, my name is Patrick Houston. I'm calling in from New York City. I'm with a group called New York Communities for Change. So we do a lot of organizing around racial, economic, and climate justice in New York City and Long Island on mostly state and local issues, but occasionally federal and very often against corporations. So New York Communities for Change is part of the Stop the Money Pipeline Coalition. Very happy to be a part of it. And we are working with many allies, both on a national level with the whole Stop the Money Pipeline Coalition, but also a lot of smaller groups in New York City to organize towards the April 23rd, especially the New York City focus, to put the pressure on BlackRock and JP Morgan Chase, especially on that day. So I can give a few examples of what we're envisioning, especially now as we are, recalibrating to quarantine. So there's a couple things that we're trying to focus on that we think can still be engaging and exciting for people to take part in and still have a good impact, a strong impact on BlackRock and JP Morgan Chase. If I could mention briefly and generally, one really exciting thing and positive thing about hitting JP Morgan Chase and especially BlackRock is relative to some other large corporations, especially BlackRock, they're not as used to being under the heat from activists. And so we've seen BlackRock, as Ayako mentioned earlier, respond more significantly earlier than we expected. So that's exciting, but regardless, they still have billions in the fossil fuel industry. So we got to change that. So really quickly, just some of the exciting tactics that we're planning in New York City for the 23rd that will be integrated into a longer live stream that Ruth or others may talk more about is, a series of quick live streams from several spokespersons that have either been directly impacted by climate change or are calling out these targets. So just in a nutshell, for the sake of brainstorming, the plan is to have 6 live streams, not simultaneous, but consecutive, 6 live streams at 6 different iconic locations throughout the city with 6 different spokespersons at each one, giving a quick spiel and then encouraging 6 different actions. I won't go over all 6, but I will just go over 2 to give you a sense. So one is going to be in front of the JP Morgan Chase headquarters. We have the honor of having so many corporate headquarters here in New York City, being facetious. But we have so one is going to be out front of the JP Morgan Chase headquarters, where we are going to encourage people, like Jane Fonda just did, to move their money out of JP Morgan Chase personally and to go online and take videos and pictures of them cutting up their credit cards. And we're also going to be calling on JP Morgan Chase to stop its part in investing billions and billions in fossil fuels. So there will be one person there. Of course, we're monitoring to see, is it even wise and safe to send one person and one live streamer out in front of the headquarters. But that's the idea there. Everybody else will be at home. The second location is going to be in front of a BlackRock headquarters. And so here the call is going to be, there's going to be a collective prayer. And this, drawing back again, you know, it actually ties into what Ayaka was talking about before, but to draw that moral distinction between BlackRock's actions and what they should be doing. And it's also going to be calling on BlackRock to divest from fossil fuels. So there's several other iconic locations that we're going to have live streamers at, and each is going to call on the audience to take an action. But I'll stop there so we have time for the others.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And my heart goes out to New Yorkers right now. Ruth, thank you for joining us. I'm so excited that you're on the line with us. Ruth comes with a plethora of experience organizing, and I very much respect her and have been enjoying working with her through the Stop the Pipeline Coalition. It's such a joy to me to meet fellow activists that show up. And you know, I think I shared earlier that I've been angry, and it's just been a joy to be with people who share my anger and show up that way. And Ruth is definitely a person that shows up. Can you share, Ruth?
So,
oh, go ahead.
I just want to note that we're at time. But
can we have
we can continue to go for a little while. I just wanted to let people know, if you have to drop off, we will be sending you a link to the recording of this posted on YouTube in the next couple days. So if you have to leave now, you'll be able to watch the rest of this conversation.
Okay, apologies for the time. Ruth, can you speak on what, so some of the, you know, there's been a lot of back and forth about whether we should do anything that is not online, you know, whether we should be doing anything physically showing up somewhere where we could be exposing ourselves to the virus. So there's been a debate within the, you know, the organization as well. But what are some creative ways people can show up, Ruth?
Yeah, thanks for that, and great to see you all in there, Patrick and Aya and Mary Kay, and thanks Don for hosting and for all the folks joining here. Also, just wanted to mention, well, this happened just literally moments ago. My brother just had a baby in Nashville, him and his wife. So that's a very exciting thing that's happening in our life this moment. Just wanted to share that all with you. Yeah, this is you know, right. It is a lot going on, an unprecedented time. You know, what are appropriate actions we can be doing. I think one of the first things that people can do is, one, look at your own, kind of your own business. You know, through this process over the last 6 months, I realized that like my daughter's college fund is with BlackRock. And that was something she has a 529 account. And I didn't know until I went back and I was like, oh, I get statements from them. And so there's been some direct engagement. I've sent letters there. I also have car insurance and home insurance with Safeco. And that is a Liberty Mutual company. So they have a policyholders meeting that's coming up actually tomorrow. So if you have a policy with them, you have a voice, you know, within those companies. If you do have a Chase credit card or a Chase account, you can be engaging them directly. So, you know, we're asking folks that there's also a very live action kind of conversation. I saw some of it in the thread here. Is this the moment to divest? There will be people cutting up their Chase cards, because I think that conversation just naturally comes up, and it's a really powerful thing that people can do. Not everybody has a Chase account. We've got some pilots that are happening right now with people calling state treasurers and the different kind of bodies to influence the board of directors vote at the Chase shareholder meeting in May to remove Lee Raymond, who was a former ExxonMobil CEO and kind of #1 climate denier, to get him off the Chase board of directors. So that's a big push that people are doing. And this is so that we're kind of, what are these strategic ways that we can be doing that? People are calling Chase's shareholders and calling them to vote no on Lee Raymond. We're doing things like emailing the CEO the board of directors, the operating committee of the company. A group in Portland just had this great idea that they're going to be doing kind of Yelp reviews of Chase on Google Maps, and any ways that they can to be talking about their climate investments and the amount of money they're putting towards climate and Indigenous rights abuses. So it's really a big opportunity to kind of look at, what are some of the websites that you use? What are some of your social circles? What are the conversations that people are having? And where can we have impact? I think Patrick brought that in. And that's one of the biggest pieces, because what we were doing before was we were planning thousands of people to be showing up at bank branches all over the country. And where can we replicate some of that? But then also we want to be really mindful. We at one point put forth a tactic about, doing Twitter storm on branch managers or calling branch managers. And then we realized that we actually went to call and practice the tactic, that people were already that are concerned about their money or having problems. It was like a 30-minute wait, and we're like, oh, that's not the right tactic. So I think that this is a time to be practicing and floating things. We do that piece where we're throwing noodles against the wall, and we're going to find one that sticks. So this is a great time to be planning and opening up strategic conversations and being really creative. So this I think there's not a lot of bounds on it, but then we just need to practice and see what some of those items might be. Check.
Thank you, Ruth, for that. There are a lot of questions. Is it okay to go to them?
Yeah, I think it's fine. Some people are starting to leave because I think they probably had something scheduled next.
Yeah.
But most people are still here, and feel free to do what you need to do. And again, we'll have the recording as well as other materials for you soon. So I can read out the questions that haven't been answered already. Some have been answered by text, and you can go in the Q&A module and see how they were answered. We have one here from Brett Barnt. A few here from Brett. Main question is, can we back... Oh, that just disappeared because somebody answered it by text.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Do you still want me to?
Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't know it would disappear. Basically, there are a lot of questions about credit cards. Where can we get their credit cards? I believe the banks, actually, the ones listed under the Stop the Money Pipeline Resources tab, the banks do issue credit cards. I'm not sure if that answers your questions. Ruth or Patrick, if you have any other ideas about where to get better credit cards. The banks, if you get a checking account with them, they also have an offer for a credit card. So that's how I will be replacing my credit cards, is through my new bank. And there's also questions about how to, let's see. So how to change the government, the licenses to banks, and get laws passed about what they can do about banking license. The problem is that the government is dysfunctional and it's not doing their job, as you can see with this pandemic. It's, I always kind of joke that democracy has been eaten by capitalism, but it's not a joke, it's serious. And Ruth or Patrick, any other ideas about credit cards and how to affect change through governance? I think that government's just not going to do stuff right now.
So there's a couple different threads that are really active right now. So there's a policy work group within the Stop the Money Pipeline that is working on specifically the bailouts. One of the conversations we've been having is that this is a systems disruption. So what's happening right now is a shift from kind of our usual business as usual, and where can we make shifts right now so that when things do come back online, then we've making those steps away from an extractive economy and towards a regenerative economy. So like the Green New Deal. So there's a lot of live conversations that are happening right now, kind of in the DC policy world. We've also been looking at, there's been a lot of work around public banking that's been happening for some time, both public banking with the states, but then also sovereign banking. So some tribes are looking at their own systems to have wealth stay within their communities and be administered by their communities. And these have been building over the last 2 or 3 years. What we saw with the defund the Dakota Access Pipeline movement, you saw divestments happening from like Seattle and San Francisco from companies like Wells Fargo. And it happened on a big scale. And it really kind of opened up a lot of the questions and the work that we're all doing right now. And this is happening on such a bigger scale that we have a lot of those, you know, I think Naomi Klein alluded to it earlier, the ideas laying around. And then this is the time is like the big questions are like, how do we actually implement those and have lasting change? And I don't have, you know, huge answers for that, but there's some incredible ideas that are laying around that have been building for years now. Check.
So one of the ways that, thank you, Ruth, for that. One of the ways that I think we need immediate help is to spread the word right now. And, you know, if you have groups you belong to, I think one of the big things that we can do is to just make the connection that our wallets, what is in our wallets matter. And we have power to change this conversation, but we need a lot of people to show up expressing concern and objecting to what's going on. And so there's 2 weeks leading up to these webinars, and we can absolutely use your help. I will be sending out an email with the video and the slideshow, but in that we'll have ways you could share this information so that people will tune in on Earth Day, where there will be concrete asks explained through the streaming videos. And that's really when hopefully we'll have 2 more weeks to prepare, and we'll have a better plan of action on how people can show up. But mostly right now it's done, you know, from our homes through social media or the internet. And that's where we can really show, get help, is to amplify this message that there's huge connections between, you know, the money and the banks and the insurance companies and what is going on. So that's our talk, and hopefully we've addressed a lot of the one question: how might COVID-19 plus regulations, restrictions impact the campaign and people's openness for issues other than Corona? How to deal with this? So I was on the phone with Bill McKibben yesterday about messaging, and with the communications group of the Stop the Putting Pipeline. If you go to the website, there is a place at the bottom of the website on the homepage where you could join a listserv, and you will get notifications on these open meetings by activists, by the coalition, where we can brainstorm how we can show up and talk about, you know, what's going on and the latest news going on in this field, because there's stuff going on every day right now. So stopthemoneypipeline.com is the website, and there is the listserv. But, you know, I signed in and I joined in on these meetings. And so one of the things that Bill McKibben said about the COVID-19 is that there are certain opportunities in this conversation, in this crisis. And right now, things are not connected to the pandemic or secondary news. But there's absolutely a connection between the coronavirus and climate change and all the disaster capitalism's changes that have been at play. And for example, the Keystone Pipeline, you know, they're putting workers to work to put the Keystone Pipeline in place right now, despite the pandemic, to displace people. They're also taking away tribal land. In a concerted effort, while we're all panicking over the pandemic. And this goes to the worst part of American history, where we were handing out smallpox blankets to indigenous people, knowing that they were infected. We're putting people to work on pipelines, and that's not only egregious, it's offensive to me. And I feel like this is a time where we should be outraged as a public. And so there are ways that these stories are connected, the atrocities are connected, and we should be talking about it, and we should be outraged openly. Go ahead, Don.
I don't know if you have any other final thoughts. I didn't want to butt in.
No, there's another question. I will type it an answer, and then thank you so much. Apologies for going over time. Thank you, Ruth and Patrick. Do you have any final words, Ruth or Patrick?
The only thing
I just want to say thank you to everybody for their time and for getting kind of educated on this issue and their involvement. Check.
Yeah, and I would just add, yeah, thanks everybody for hopping on, and thanks Don and Yako for facilitating this. Please spread the word, tell your friends, neighbors, family. That's the only way that we can win this. And I just want to reiterate, how hitting the some of the advantages of targeting the private sector is sometimes they have the opportunity and the ability to move relatively quickly once they decide to do a thing. And so that's one thing that I find really hopeful about hitting the banks and the asset managers and the insurers directly, is once they feel enough pressure to act, they can do that decision making and execute relatively quick compared to government. And when the big ones do it, it quickly changes the whole market behind it. It's a little bit of an overstatement, but something that's very, very hopeful. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you very much, Ayako. As we've said earlier, we will be sending you all sorts of materials by email that then you can share out with your networks. And please do. Just want to encourage everybody to take good care of themselves and do some breathing if you need to. We might still be stuck in our homes for a while now. But when we come together like this, I know that I feel more encouraged, more inspired, more hopeful. So I hope that we stay in touch and see you all again very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.